Thank you very much, Ben. I think we'll get more into all of these topics in the panel discussion, which will start now. Dr. James.
We have some good provocations and some detailed kind of insights into how things are developed on the ground, and a few provocations I think that we can follow up. So I think there are a lot of people here with lots of questions, so I'm just going to try and pick out a good range of questions. So who wants to go first?
Actually, I have a doubt regarding the recruiting process, the one that is in Amazon. And the thing is that it's going to be trained on data, which already might have some biases. And so we're trying to build a fair system. So, like, how is the fairness ensured? And the second thing is, like, how do you make machine learning fair in the first place? Because it's all being trained on data.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thankfully, we're not solving it from first principles, so there is a whole discipline of fair machine learning that we're borrowing from. So you may or may not know it's a topic that's receiving a lot of attention in the machine learning literature at the moment. People are rightly very concerned about that problem. I think they should be. But the way I think of it is exactly as you said. The existing data is biased. Right? What does that mean? It means that today, the humans making decisions about, I don't know, judicial sentencing or hiring decisions or whatever, are not doing the right thing. And so there's an opportunity for us to do better. And that's the way I like to think about it. Like, automation should make the world a better place here. So I won't take you through the actual literature on this is how you design a fair system, but I can point you to workshops and textbooks and all kinds of stuff on how you build fair machine learning models. There are a bunch of ways you can do it.
Okay, can I say one thing on this? There's actually a fundamental problem when you're dealing with small minorities in machine learning that you don't have much data about those minorities. So that's true for rare diseases, it's true for strongly underrepresented groups. It's not a completely trivial problem, but one thing that is also closely linked to the issue of fairness is the issue of interpretability. So if you understand how a machine makes a prediction, then there can be a human in the loop that corrects it. It's potentially difficult when you're trying to do things with hundreds of millions of parameters that you're optimizing, and none of them means anything in particular. But it's another big field of machine learning at the moment.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that the problem is solved, but I think we have an idea of how to get started, and the potential to make the world a better place.
I mean, to some extent it might be unsolvable, but it's not that the current system works better. That's the point of anything.
I have a question to the first speaker. So, okay, the first, it's not a question, it's a remark. I think your reading in no AI scientists are interested in AGI, or concern was a bit selective. I mean, you mentioned Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking, but Stewart Russell was literally on the author list. You just didn't say the name, which I think is unfair. Or David Hassabis, for example. And the other question is, so as far as I know, deep learning has been on the peak of the Gartner hype cycle for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. So what makes you think the value is coming now?
Yeah, thank you very much for this. The question concerning Russell, so for those of you who have done the textbook reading definitions of AI, Russell and Norvig is the standard reference for AI definitions. So Stewart Russell was among the 4 people who co-authored the paper with Hawking as the big name. But then so there is I mean, I can get to details since you asked. So eventually Russell wasn't included in the final paper, and there is a list of people who claim that they are experts and people who are not experts when you signed the petition for the banning autonomous weapons thing, and then they made a rhetoric trick there with who's an expert, who isn't. But I think that there's a social lesson to be learned from there. The use of expertise there and how each person presents themselves as an expert is interesting in itself. I can go on with details, but I don't think that most of the audience now will be interested in that. Yeah, and what was the second part of the question again?
Second question is that in the applications about hype cycle, deep learning.
Oh, yeah. So that's a hypothesis. I mean, I don't say that we have entered the trough of disillusionment in deep learning, and I don't say that deep learning equals AI. Basically, AI people say that deep learning isn't AI, that they use AI, for example, as a label to attract grants, but it's not AI, deep learning. So there is a difference there. And I don't know if I don't want to make predictions actually, if it's going to enter the trough of disillusionment or not, because basically predictions are tricky. But I just see that there are more and more events like this. And by that, I mean that possibly people are kind of disillusioned by the AI bubble both with a U and an A. So.
Any comments?
I can say something. I should say that wherever we are in the hype cycle with respect to deep learning, I think it still is. We're still just getting started in terms of extracting the value from it and even arguably simpler uses of machine learning. So where people in maybe academic circles or that follow this kind of press get fed up with the coverage of it, I promise you we're a long way away from actually exhausting the applications of it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. It's entirely the case that the deep learning neural networks are not AI. But as I was indicating in my talk, we do use these networks as basic building blocks for lots of other things. As I say, they're simply a universal function approximator. And that is a very powerful thing. And you can use that in a building block around so-called reinforcement learning, for example, which I think is starting to get a little bit more. So reinforcement learning is where you're learning to interact with an environment and to optimize some reward that may be delivered late, so you don't get your reward immediately. So this is starting to get close to what some people would recognize as artificial intelligence, maybe even in the 1970s. And they're enabled by these deep learning building blocks.
Can I say something on that? I think that the issue with reinforcement learning is very interesting, because that may be the case where you start having a genuinely high-dimensional problem. So a lot of the big successes of AI, which is reinforcement learning paired with deep neural networks, have been in highly controlled scenarios. Games.
Indeed.
Computer games, Atari games, or chessboard, or whatever. You put the robot cook in the kitchen where the actual amount of variability is not controlled, essentially, then that's a much bigger problem. So I don't know. Regarding the first half of the question that AI scientists are not worried about the problems that AI may have in store, I have mixed feelings. I think few people actually in machine learning take really seriously singularity problems. I guess the general feeling is that, yeah, artificial intelligence is probably doing extremely well, but human stupidity is doing even better, and it may terminate the planet much earlier than AI. That's my impression, and I think a lot of other machine learners think that is probably true. We have huge problems with, as a society, we are not investing on, partly because there are hypes, but partly because we've just can't agree that there are real problems.
There's another one back there. No? Okay. Who else have we got? Over here? Will someone put their hand up? Okay, yes.
I had a question for the Stuart. It's just, given the history of military investment, especially DARPA and AI, what do you think the effects of the, I suppose, military arms race of AI between China and the US and other powers might have on the hype cycle? And do you think it will have any?
Sure, this is a very important question. I guess the only real question concerning AI. So I had a very sweet interviewee who recently retired, and when we were discussing Asimov's laws and their validity, what they told me was that if we would just apply Asimov's laws to humans and not robots, that would make the world a better place. I don't say that I'm a pacifist because the term is very loaded, but I think that, yeah, why build weapons in the first place? You know, that's my very simple answer. Not AI weapons, but weapons in general. And in response to previous questions concerning biases and so on, yeah, it's a problem of education, not a problem of technology.
That was not an answer to the question. You know, I mean, you can say that you would like weapons not to be built, but they are building it. So I think the question was, what are the ethical implications of that? Well, I don't have an answer. I mean, yeah, it's terrible. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, if I need to refer to a model, it's a very circular model and it's a very pessimistic model. So basically, technology evolves because of war, and the more technology you have, then you have more healthy people. The more healthy people you have greater population, and the greater population you have more reasons for war, and then the more war you have more technology to make war, and so on and so on and so on. That's Gregory Bateson, early cybernetician, and involved in the AI conferences, the early cybernetics conferences, which gave birth to AI eventually as a spin-out. Yeah.
Thanks all of you for the talks. I feel like there is an aspect of this conversation that is extremely important, and in my personal opinion, most important than everything else, which is not so much the fear of singularity, but the political underpinnings of the hype and the way people deal with artificial intelligence. So the way I think of it is that data has I don't think it's controversial to say that data has the function of capital, in the sense that like grants go to data science, and the guys made like a rocket AI and they got millions, and then you have Google, whose business model is basically we have a lot of data. So data and machine learning as a means of extracting value from data is basically about politics, and I wonder if the hype is driven by that fact, and I wonder what your thoughts are regarding that.
Since you mentioned rocket AI, yeah, I think you can't understand if we think about AI or machine learning as a scientific discipline, we are mistaken. The kind of curves of hype that Vasilis was presenting, thought originally for scientific innovation, don't really work when actually it's the biggest companies in the world that have invested hundreds of billions in these kind of things. We can't really think about the global implications of AI without thinking about economics, I think. You're totally right. So, in terms of hype, yes, I mean, you have to drive the hype because money is not really actual products, it's expectation of what you will do tomorrow. And if people don't have expectations of what you will do tomorrow, you're bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, I think ownership is a worry. As I mentioned, I think that AI will emerge from a search box? And are we worried about a company like Google essentially owning that? Because they really do have potential, I think, to dominate the field. Fortunately, I mean, there are other search box search engines, but they really do dominate. And if you think about it, if a company like Google chose to charge for use of their search engine, actually we'd pay. We'd have to pay, because it's become a completely essential part of our everyday life, certainly our professional life. That does worry me a little bit. I mean, I hear rumours that talking in the States of trying to break up these companies. I think that will be very hard. But that does concern me, the ownership of these technologies.
I think the point you made about paying for Google is actually really important. So a fundamental aspect is that the services are free. Amazon or Google is free, you're paying in data, but you don't know because data is free in our current terms. Now, if you have something that is free and even 0.01% better than something else that is free, well, you're going to go for the better one. So you, by default, have a monopolistic dynamics. So Google, yeah, there are other search engines, but Google is slightly better because it's got more data or whatever. Everyone will use Google. So unless you start understanding that Google is not free and you assign a value to data, then if you had to pay for Google, you could choose to use a slightly worse one that charges you slightly less. Yeah? Not only the best cars get sold, also the slightly better, but they're cheaper.
And just to situate that, it's a long story. It's an old history. So what we now say, data rich, data poor, there are such divides. It's a very old narrative from the information rich and information poor. It started in the 70s, 80s. People were talking about this stuff. So it's repeating the same narrative.
You're the only one from a monopolistic company. I don't want to make you feel bad.
No, I don't feel bad. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that people are choosing to use these things, and they have a choice not to, as you say.
Do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can choose not to use. Sure, you can choose not to have a smartphone. You can choose to buy all your stuff at the local shop. You can choose to search for information in the library. I think you're right that people have a poor understanding of the economics of these kinds of companies. They're not free. There's a really interesting book called Chaos Monkeys by the guy who set up the advertising exchange at Facebook. And his argument is that all of these big tech companies are offering products for free. What most users don't realize is that they're being paid for by the advertising that's powered by the data that you give the companies passively by using the services. But what's interesting is that's a model that people accept. Like, there have been many iterations where people have tried to charge for the use of a social network, and the average person won't accept that. They would rather use Facebook, which is a notionally free product, where it's your data that allows the targeted advertising, which Facebook can charge for, which actually props them up. Google works the same way, right? Google makes all of their money from AdWords and AdSense.
So let's have a thought experiment. Do you think people would be happy to use Facebook if they knew that they will be targeted by fake news campaigns through their data? Let's take a poll straw. Who would like to use Facebook and get fake news? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think there is, like, there's a kind of educational thing where a lot of this stuff is implicit in the use of the platforms, and people don't know very much about it. I think it's incumbent on the companies to make it clearer, A, what's going on and what the business model is, and B, allowing you to opt out. It's something that we take very seriously at Amazon. Like, yes, we know your purchase history and your view history and your search history, but we make it very easy for you to say, browse incognito, or say, forget everything that you knew about me. The experience changes, but that's fine. If that's how you want to interact with the platform, that's fine.
You're more traditional. You do sell things. That's
Yeah,
has existed since the.
we sell things, although I should say, for the sake of honesty, the fastest growing sector at Amazon's advertising. Like, it's a very powerful model. But yeah, my feeling is people are implicitly using these things without understanding how they're being charged for it, and that's bad. But I think as long as you're open about how it works, then people are free to opt out.
1, 2, and then 3, and then we'll see how we get on.
Hi, so you raised an interesting point, which was that technology never develops along its own logic. So you're sort of implying there that there are some social logics that exist out there that are currently shaping the development of AI, so they affect the AI that gets built and how it gets used. So maybe, given that you have a historical background in AI, how have those logics kind of changed from AI's inception to like now, and what does that say about the kind of AI that we're developing today? Maybe about hype as well.
Wow, thank you, thanks a lot for that. I will give a short version of that because otherwise I should write a couple of PhDs on this question. I guess the main thing which changed was that people in early AI, they developed it in order to understand intelligence, human intelligence, whereas now they think that they can contribute to what can we do with human intelligence plus machine intelligence. So this is the main difference, I guess. Yeah, it's. I guess that the first part, I kinda touched on that before. So in the early stages, early scientists tried to convince of the validity of something which sounded very crazy. I mean, your talk was, the sort of an imaginary dialogue of a contemporary AI scientist and an old school AI scientist. That says a lot, Well, have you solved these basic problems of reasoning? Whereas now we focus on the small things, on the small technologies that can build up. So the social logic behind it, that touches upon the other question on some machine learning specialists, making very grandiose statements. So there are politics behind, but not politics in the sort of capitalist regime versus the poor, but I would say social niches and particular institutions who want to appear powerful, and there is plenty of competition between various institutions. So if you just look big institutions that do AI in the world, they do have different agendas, and they do compete with each other. They blame each other for the same things as if they were doing better. You can compare, for example, either by continent or by institution or by country, and you can see their projects on public engagement and compare for yourself. I don't want to engage in name dropping and so on. But there is, to me, the way I see it, but of course I'm biased because I'm a social scientist, to me it's all social. And they can't really separate between the social and the political, and sometimes the psychological if you think of the fears. So, yeah.
No. It was all over my head, that. I'm a mathematician, just do numbers.
Oh, well, if I follow up on that, I think that today's panel was very important because, as you mentioned earlier, people need to understand how these things